This is some wild symbolism from a Jack Kirby cartoon, from a comic book from 1976. So, is this Black Lives Matter or a white movement? It's funny how the white devils took over Black Lives Matter. All these pale skins with BLM signs. Back of the bus, Rosa. You guys need to let us handle it. I have a question. Shouldn't black people be the leaders of BLM? It's like BLM is already segregated. And what exactly is their platform? Is it the Fourth Amendment issue around no-knock warrants? Because if it is, how come none of these woke politicians are talking about the legal issues? I see them painting streets and kneeling, but I don't hear anyone actually saying what they feel the problem is and what their solution is. BLM has been taken over by kvetchy soy boys, and Instagram whores who are just there for the photo ops. You see the Antifa moms and dads at the front lines trying to tear down fences and burn a federal building down, a building full of other human beings. These blue cities in blue states and blue people are destroying their own cities. Why don't they go to the mayor or the governor's house? They're protesting the pigs, man. The cops don't make the laws. Go bring your peaceful assembly to the people who enact the laws. Didn't you watch Saturday morning cartoons? You, effing retards, elected the effing retards who run your state. Ted Wheeler, Jacob Frey, Jenny Durkin, and all the other far-left city council members. You voted for them. They're all Democrats. Oh, Flint hasn't had clean water. Who runs Flint? You want to take a look at the city council? They're all black and they're all Democrats. Democrats vote Democrat. City burns. I remember exploring Portland and Seattle decades ago. The idiots who are running around now are probably mostly in their 20s and 30s, so they were too young for 9/11 and have no idea how bad communism is because the survivors of communism are older now. But more importantly, the stories, the horrors of communism don't get told because look who controls the media. Godless, pedophile commies. Some wrong thinker on Twitter was passing around this page from a comic. You know, it's hard to describe a lot of these Twitter channels. The left would call them far-right fascists, but they aren't all on the right or nationalists or even European. These channels just point out bias, hypocrisy, and subversion, but most of it is on the left. But then they all get called white supremacists. But like Mark Waid admitted, that definition is broadly applied. So this page is, I guess, from a Captain America. It was interesting. People on Twitter were joking about how base the comic was, but those guys aren't comic guys. They have no idea about Marvel or Ta-Nehisi Coates, which are very, very left. What this comic is doing is an old propaganda technique of subversion. They bring up a line of argument that the reader would agree with. The writer knows that, so they have the most reprehensible character make the points. I saw it recently done on Twitter. It's really weird when people on Twitter seem to act in groupthink, and there's another reason for that. There's an app in the App Store for these certain groups, protected groups, to dogpile people. So that's probably one of the reasons you see a lot of repeated phrases. People were discussing the phrase, "Those you can't criticize are your masters." So the commies want to stop that line of analysis, and they said, "Oh, a white supremacist said that phrase." Well, I'm sure he said many things. So did Stalin and so did Hitler. It doesn't make them untrue. Besides, that phrase is thousands of years old. And to be honest, any phrase that makes people defensive is something that needs to be investigated. So they have the bad guy in a movie or a comic explain ideas that the most sane, rational people agree with, but it's coming from a character that the creator has portrayed as a monster. But the ideas are valid or not, no matter the source. The merit of the idea stands alone, or at least it should. In this comic, you get the antagonist saying very normal, rational things that the reader would agree with. The writer is trying to say that all these ideas are fruit of the poison tree, and no true Scotsman would agree with the Red Skull. And actually, I never read this comic as a kid because the Red Skull was kind of too scary for me. That's a very creepy character if you're, I don't know, kind of young to read about a skull walking around. I stick with Spider-Man, Iron Man, maybe Batman, Daredevil. Just those are funner, dumber characters. But Marvel overplays their hand a bit here because the ideas are so rational that the reader absolutely does agree with them. It's like saying you want a safe neighborhood, Sunday church, and dinner with the grandparents. Well, you know, the Nazis wanted safe neighborhoods. Are you a Nazi? Yeah, sign me up for the Nazis. Apparently, the Nazis are the good guys. If you guys on the left want to turn the nation into Portland and Seattle, then sign us up for the whoever is opposed to that. You guys are so effing retarded, you make the Nazis look like the good guys. They keep saying that the right are the bad guys, but it's the left wing that want to destroy free expression in the Second Amendment. The people burning down buildings and shooting people are left wing. BLM rapes and murders women. Antifa attacks the elderly and the disabled and children. That's the Democrats' base. So the reader looks at the Red Skull and starts to come to the conclusion that he's the good guy. Whoever wrote this thought they were having a laugh at those silly, intolerant conservatives and their patriarchal desires for a family and safe neighborhoods. But if you have an antagonist say things that the reader agrees with, you've just turned the antagonist into the protagonist. And now the reader knows the writer's politics. Marvel can't write heroes or villains because the whole concept of heroism doesn't apply to the left. When Marvel writes this stuff, they get too close to the edge of things that undermines their argument. This is going to get weird, but hear me out here. For most of American history, many Americans would have identified as socialist on domestic issues, but also fiercely nationalist. They viewed themselves as Americans. America used to be a nation before about 1965. In 2020, America is just a commercial zone controlled by a shadow cabal of billionaires. Yes, Ta-Nehisi Coates, most of them are bankers. So most of America was socialist nationalist. They didn't want foreigners coming in, driving down wages, and enriching corporate fat cats. They wanted American resources to make Americans rich. America could have had taxpayer-funded healthcare and college, but we can't pay for all of Latin America. There's just not enough money to pay for 50 million people who take more out of the system than they pay in. On average, over their lifetime, they're taking out about $250,000. And which is what has been happening since the 1960s. America could have been a paradise, but then they opened the doors to Mexico and closed the doors to Europe. Simultaneously, feminism and birth control dropped the birth rate of hippie white chicks and then later career-oriented white chicks who never had children. The business of America isn't business. It should have been its people. Otherwise, you've got a nation of slaves to international billionaires. How do you prevent unions from forming? Diversify the workplace. Diverse people have adverse interests. It's a permanent low-trust group that is easily led by a corporate overlord. Well, I really couldn't say overlord, could I? America is a lost cause at this point, so they're destroying Europe. Of what benefit is it to Sweden to have third world grooming gangs in Sweden? None. Not even zero, because it's less than zero, because they rape and murder the real Swedish girls. And they're having babies at a faster rate. They are replacing the Swedes and the Germans and the French and the English and all the others. But while Europe is busy dealing with crime caused by Soros-type people, the NGOs are free to do as they please. One of the goals is to have a EU that is more than just a name. Give it some bite, and they want to lead it. If they control the EU, the IMF, then they control a staggering amount of money and power. If Poland refuses to take Africans, then the EU tells the international banks to make things difficult for Poland. Poland would have no chance to stand against a strong EU. Here's an example. The real English want Brexit. They're getting sick of being controlled by a foreign power. The Indians and Pakistanis and Jews and all the others want England to stay in the European Union. You got foreigners with adverse interests to the real English telling the English how to craft the future of their country. Because in a democracy, they will vote in representatives who will then vote to open the borders for more foreigners. It's the camel nose under the tent. Why would the English want to be replaced in their only homeland? The English don't, but the bankers and NGOs do. A diverse people are slaves. It's a permanent low trust, low IQ society. Diverse cultures rarely mix well. They have different values. The more aggressive culture will win and colonize. That's exactly what Islam is doing in Europe. Europeans don't even have free speech to speak out against their own genocide. Count Dankula and his Nazi pug. Who controls Europe? It's not the native Europeans, and it's time that Europe took back Europe. You simply can't have millions of foreigners in Europe. They have to go back. Like I said, America is over. 2020, it's a Mexican majority. Why did the founding fathers bother if they were just going to give it to Mexico a few hundred years later? They fought for the Alamo, but they didn't guard the border. The best America can hope for is to slow down the decay. Great, Trump is building a wall. So what? The Mexicans vote blue. They'll just vote to tear it down. So it's great to raise American issues and drop red pills, but you got to be honest about how screwed America is. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe, and if you're on BitChute, which I guess you are, sub to my YouTube channel so I can get to 1,000 so I can live stream.